Hello, my name's Jorb, and I love gear. Over the last several years, we've seen tons of companies release small, Eurorack-compatible, semi-modular synthesizers. Things like the Mother 32, early Pittsburgh all-in-ones like the SV-1, options from places like Create Audio and Dreadbox. There's a huge range of instruments that fit this bill, all with different capabilities, all at different prices. But in all the videos and all the reviews and all the forum threads about them, they get recommended for the same thing. They're a great way to get started with Eurorack. I'm willing to bet you can find a written review or a YouTube video, any of them, of one of these self-contained semi-modular Eurorack compatible guys that references it as a good way to start. But what does that really look like? If you start with an Erebus or a Neutron or a West Pest or whatever and want to expand into something bigger, what does that intermediate step look like? Wouldn't it be nice if somebody could make a video where they had a bunch of recent Eurorack mountable semi-modular synthesizers and they showed a bunch of example setups of where to grow next? Well, you're in luck. That is this video. I've got a bunch of these little semi-modular guys, way too many Eurorack modules, only a few cases, and enough willpower to sit in front of the camera, at least for today. So you're going to see me mock up a bunch of setups. Some will be complete zero-rack systems. Some will be partially in and out of a case. It'll be pretty loose, but I'll give some tips and some direction and just some like lines of thinking for how to choose where to move next. Very generally, what it might look like if you expand into Eurorack. Cool? Cool. So here's your synfluencing disclosure. I'm trying to be better about like following the rules on this stuff, and I've been gathering modules for years, but I should still mention everything you see from Dreadbox or Create, and also the Taiga from Pittsburgh Modular, I got for free. Anything from Nano or STG Sound Labs, I got at a discount. Everything else I paid for myself, probably used, except for the ALM Busy Circuits ASQ-1. I got that from Perfect Circuit for this video in exchange for this short message. Perfect Circuit is a retailer. They sell Eurorack, effects pedals, pro audio gizmos, and all sorts of other gadgets. But really, they're good people selling cool stuff. And I don't know if I still have to mention this, but I did last time. They ship internationally, which is actually pretty cool. You can check them out with their affiliate links below. Okay, there you go. There's our exposition. Shall we head to the first setup? Surprise! This first one is sort of a subversion. This first one does not involve a Eurorack case or Eurorack power or really any other Eurorack modules. It's just combining multiple semi-modular synthesizers, semi-modular units, because if you think about how much of a commitment it is to get a Eurorack case and buy all the utility modules you need to have a voice set up properly, you're really committing a lot of money. And if your desire to do that, to expand, is just born out of, man, I wish I had another envelope, man, I wish I had another LFO, it'd be cool to run this through a filter. In a lot of cases, you will get more value out of just another semi-modular thing. So right now, this is the oscillator from the West Pest coming into the filter of the Erebus, while the Erebus envelope controls the fold mod. And already this is much more flexible than either of these things on their own, and I'm not even using a lot of the sound generation here, and I'm not using every module available here. And if, you know, all you want to try is adding a delay, you can buy an effects pedal. If all you want to add is some dirt, I gotta have one laying around. And if you just want to add some dirt, buy an effects pedal. If you just want to add some modulation, maybe try and buy an effects pedal. And you can save a lot of money and a lot of commitment and a lot of time, because I fully believe that Eurorack is not for most people. That doesn't mean it's not awesome. It doesn't mean I don't like it. That doesn't mean it's not creatively very valuable for a lot of us. It's just important to remember that just because you have Eurorack compatible patch cables doesn't mean the only thing you can plug into it is Eurorack. Heck, even, let me reach over here. I didn't even plan on mentioning this, but I just saw it. Something like this. Oh God. Something like this. My Korg ARP Odyssey reissue. Right on the back here. What the hell are those? Those are Eurorack compatible patch cables. So this first little subversion is just to make the point of, don't think you have to get into Eurorack. Just because you have an option to do it and you know you want to grow, please don't commit to Eurorack before you really know that's what you want to do. I really encourage you to think about if it really does make the most sense for you. So there's your subversion. But if you do stop and think about if it is actually for you, and something like this isn't enough compatibility or patchability or flexibility or effects pedals aren't enough tweaking or enough modulation, whatever it is that leads you to say, you know what, Eurorack is for me, then these next few setups are really going to be cool for you. Here we go. This is just the Taiga and the Erebus packaged into the Create Nifty keys. Now, I would like to demonstrate this idea or my concept here with a different setup, but I wasn't just going to buy a bigger Eurorack case just for this, but just to show you your setup can grow in a way that doesn't implement more complex patching. This is just these two synthesizers working totally separately but packaged together. So if I had a 6U Eurorack case, a bigger 2-row Eurorack case with enough room for all 4 of the little guys that I've got, I would do that. I would pack them all in, have some utilities for mixing or individual outputs, and that would be it. Hypothetically, I would sequence that with something like my MPC, which has 8 CV and gate outs. But with what I've got, the manifestation of that example I can show you is the Nifty keys. The Nifty keys could be 4-voice polyphonic if you had the space in the modules for it. I'm using it for 2 separate voices. So if I play the lower 2 octaves, that's the Taiga. If I play the upper 2 octaves, that's the Erebus. And the Erebus, I'm trying to decide what my coverage of it and the Hades looks like. I might do them together like everybody else has, but I feel like I've seen that video several times, so I'm trying to think of my own angle on it. But the Erebus is a self-contained 2-oscillator mono, of course with the filter, has separate envelopes for the amp and the filter, and has a built-in delay. Just like the Taiga does, but I think this is PT2399, like a digital. Doesn't matter. They're slightly different delays. But I can also set up a latched sequence just on the Taiga, and then play. The Erebus on its own. You totally get what I'm trying to show you. Your rack case can be a way to conveniently package these self-contained synths and not worry about patching between them or making anything more complicated. Just a way to keep everything together. Great, but this doesn't take full advantage of Eurorack in a few ways. So let's move on to a setup that does. Here's a case built totally around the East Beast. I love the East Beast as it is, but I can totally see somebody wanting a second oscillator. I can totally see somebody wanting a second envelope. Well, the magic of Eurorack, we can do that. So right now that's all East Beast. But I've also, you can see here, I've got the Nano Modules ONA and the Create Audio Function Junction, plus the STG Sound Labs .slc, which is a wave slicer. Really, I had the exact right amount of space for the O-Tool and the Magneto. They're not really part of what I'm trying to demonstrate or the idea I'm trying to get across, but delay and reverb is nice, isn't it? Part of what's so great about the Create Audio boxes, the patch bays are normaled in a way and have the ins and outs that really make them useful. So, for example, VCA mod, I can send the gate out from this keyboard or its sequencer to trigger this ADSR on the function junction, and then take that ADSR and use that to do my VCA while I leave this ADSR to do the filter. Plus, we can take the MIDI pitch out, and I'm going through just, okay. Surprise. I had edited a bit of this already, and during my hands-on filming, I feel like I didn't do a good enough job of introducing these Caixa. I am so annoyed by where I put this microphone stand. Anyway, this is not part of my obligations to Nano at all. I straight up just think that the Caixa is really, really good, and I use it in a lot of these examples, and they aren't super prevalent, so I figure, you know what, I might as well give it, you know, a little bit of a proper introduction. So this AXA 104 is, you guessed it, I should probably hold it up. It seems way big when I hold it in front of my face like this. But the AXA 104 is, you guessed it, a case with 104 HP of space for modules that includes this whole utility row. And that utility row is kind of what sets this apart for me, what makes it really compelling, especially if you're just trying to start a setup or a setup that's going to grow. Is this even going to be in focus? That utility row is the main draw for me. It helps streamline a lot of patches, and there's things that I use every single time I patch up a voice. So the right side of modules here, there's a 2-channel stereo mixer, so 4 inputs, left and right for each, and your main output. When are you ever not going to need to get audio out of this? And it goes straight to 2 1/4-inch jacks on the back. Super handy. You don't have to use any stupid adapters. All that is great. Even just like, there are cases that don't have like a master volume knob. It's nice to have that. On this left side here, we have 2 simple LFOs plus sample and hold, which is great. Not taking up precious rack space with that. I don't need to say that anymore. Jorb, keep going. There's a precision adder, which at first I didn't know what I would use it for, but I've been using it for pitch CV and a lot of patches. Editing this is going to be a huge pain in the ass. There's buffered multiples and the 2 attenuated inputs, which go to these 1/4-inch jacks on the back. You can even see how I've been using it right now. I'm running the LFO out into it, and I've been using it like an attenuator. I don't know if that's kosher or not. It seems to be okay with negative voltage. Just, you know, the range doesn't seem like it's suited for attenuating signals like this. So I've been doing it. It's been fine. Anyway, all that said and done, I talked super fast. This is going to be horrible. I think the AXA is great because a lot of the things you would have spent rack space on and said, man, there's a utility there. Now I can't have another oscillator, another filter, whatever. It's all part of the case. It's all built in there. And if you look at the price compared to an IntelliGel 4U case with all of those modules in there, it's really a compelling deal. So if you want more like very detailed hands-on coverage of the AXA, I'll point you to my good buddy Synth Dad. Nobody covers Eurorack in detail like him. I love his stuff, and he covered the AXA just as thoroughly as he does any other module. So if you're curious about them, if there's something you're curious about that I didn't cover, head over there. Okay, there's your info break over. Perfect. This specifically, the precision adder, is saving me so much time because pitch is 1 volt per octave. Each one of these notches is knocking us down an octave. So right now, I can run through here, knock it down 2, and bring it in the ONA, because without it, the pitch playing on the internal oscillator and the pitch playing on the ONA when you control it with the pitch out isn't the same. Precision adder has totally helped that. Anyway, where was I? The MIDI pitch is going out to the adder into here. Let's hear just the ONA into the filter in, so we won't have the internal oscillator, the East Beast right now. And then here's just the internal oscillator, the East Beast. Not exactly the same volumes, but we know they are the same note now. If I want to mix those, that's another thing the function junction can do. And I can take the oscillator out, which I've actually already got going, to the first channel here, the function junctions mixer. In this, I don't want to talk super specifically about it. I talk about the function junction a lot in a dedicated video. It's another thing that really surprised me. So right now, I'm taking the first 2 channels of our 3-channel mixer, and I'm mixing the oscillator out of the East Beast, which will be whatever we choose here. So I'll just put it on a sawtooth for now. And right now, just the sawtooth of the ONA. They're getting mixed together, and that's going into the filter in. Great. I really love that filter. Okay, well, we have a 3rd slot in our mixer here. Why don't we give that to another waveform here? The ONA has built-in sub-oscillator outs. Great. that pretty much delivers on what I was trying to demonstrate. But I've also got room here for the STG SoundLabs.slc. This is one of the modules I've had for a very, very long time. It's a wave slicer, so you kind of combine waves. And it's not really part of what I'm trying to demonstrate here, but I just think it's so cool. So let's start with just, I hope you can see that on the O-Tool here. So right now you're just hearing the triangle out. Right now you're just hearing the triangle out of the Ono. And if I have nothing in input B, and as I move that slice point at the rate set by this trigger input, which normally would be a sawtooth, which gives you the end of every single cycle of your oscillator, then you're switching to the B input. So I can turn my triangle into a sawtooth. Or, you guys probably can anticipate what's happening next. I can plug another waveform into there. So now it's a square on the whole B side of the travel. Great, and here's our attenuated LFO from this IXO. You can modulate that slice point. Put it somewhere in the middle. Super cool. Sorry about that little offshoot, but I really love the slicer. And it's another thing, right? Like, oh man, I wish I had more interesting oscillator options on these beasts. Not that they're not interesting, they're very, very good. But you can do that because the patch bays work the way that they do. I'm going to bring that into the mixer along with the oscillator out of our East Beast and give it one of my favorite waves. It's a sine in the square. Turn on my sequencer. Not that the East Beast is great on its own, but that's an outrageously big sound with an additional layer of control for the ADSR. Really, just because of these three additional modules, the sound got so big. With a little finesse from the IXO. But that is, and I really hope it's clicking, yeah, what I'm trying to demonstrate. I'm trying to, in this example, show you can treat these as individual modules, and with just a little bit of utility, you can bring other elements, other control voltages, other function generators into the signal path that's already part of these semi-modular things. Cool? Cool. Okay, the next example is less about incorporating elements into the signal path that already exists, and it's more about using the Eurorack to provide some supporting architecture around a synthesizer that sounds good, isn't interesting, but gets its role much better defined if it has that supporting structure. I'm going to stop rambling. Here we are. This is a system built all around the Dreadbox Hades. Okay, and the whole goal here for me in this system is flesh the Hades out as an ASCII 303 sequenced baseline synthesizer. On its own, it sounds really, really big. It's got one oscillator, but 1 and 2 octave down sub oscillators and a drive parameter here. Can be really, really, really huge. But I wish it had some sort of a built-in sequencer. It does take MIDI, so you can use all sorts of external stuff. But if we want to live in Eurorack, here is a great option. This is the ALM Busy Circuits ASQ-1. In many modes, these buttons are a keyboard. And you can plug in whatever you want. Great. And I'm using the first channel in a traditional CV and gate sequencer. So that is triggering the envelopes here in the Hades and sending it pitch information. Okay, we're getting closer to the 303 thing. What else is important to the 303 thing? Accents, the filter changing per step, changing over time. So I'm using the second row of CV and gate to just sort of somewhat randomly change pitch value. So if I hit store and I do a low value and I hold that for half the time, and I go up and I hit a high value and I do hold that for half the time. Now if I take the pitch information out and I increase the contribution of that CV track to the filter through this Acid Rain Technologies navigator, you can see that we're changing our accent there per step. So I'm going to try and plug in more of a sequence that makes sense. So I do high, low, high. So there's 3 accents sort of. Let's get our pitch back in there. Awesome. Also important to me for the 303 thing is effects. So I have this WMD Orion, which is a stereo phaser plus a wave folder. Just another way of adding some movement. And it has a wave folder. Which makes it sound even more outrageous. And the other effect, right after it, I'm going to plug it in now, is the Bizarre Jezebel Athra. It's a stereo analog delay. It does a bunch of weird stuff. If I turn off our wave folder, that gives us a little space. Love that. Over here, you'll see me, you saw the navigator earlier when I attenuated the CV for our accent channel, and the Winter Bloom big honking button is not sending out a honk, that is sending out our kick drum pattern. So if I turn down the synth channel, here I'm on a trigger channel. That's all it takes. There's our kick drum. There you go, plenty to play with. But very generally, this system isn't about changing what the Hades can do. It's not about incorporating into the sort of signal path of the Hades in a way that relies on Eurorack. It's about fleshing out these elements around it, these supporting elements that make it a more complete experience, I guess, or fulfill a role, an instrument role that we are familiar with. And this, to me, is a lot more compelling than also bringing a key step, than also bringing some pedals. Having it all built into one system is something I really, really appreciate. Okay, next. Here we are for one last setup. So the sort of, I don't know, I guess the hypothetical that might lead you to something like this. Starting with any of the setups where your semi-modular is in a rack, is in a case, and then you grow, you add more modules, and then, you're out of space. What can you do? This feels like it's not actual advice. This one also feels a little bit like a subversion. How can you easily buy yourself 40 HP back? Just put the semi-modular guy back in its skiff, its case, and connect it up while it's loose. the inconvenience of having its own power and the inconvenience of having to get longer cables to move it around or whatever is way worth it when you're potentially losing out on space and an entire other voice. Okay, so what you're going to hear, that voice is made from these modules. Function junction makes it really, really easy to keep things compact. Is there anything I haven't introduced you to? This is the DSM-01. It's a Curtis filter and a VCA. I'm really using every single module of the Caixa, which I've already introduced you to, and the ONA. The ONA has every little feature that would make another analog oscillator good is here, which is kind of exactly the same thing I feel about the Dixie. You have its own switched octave control, linear or exponential FM. On a switch, it can drop right down into LFO ranges with any of these cool shapes. Plus, you have some complex waveforms. You have a few extra complex waves on the ONA versus the Dixie, but I think on paper they're really, really similar. And I want you to think about it like that because the ONA is less money even than a used Dixie and does essentially the same thing. Plus, it's black and gold, and that might fit in your case better. Okay, I love the ONA. But that's this voice. And then I'll turn on the effects here, which is a wave folder and phaser, you know that. And then CV2. Is the Hades. Those are getting mixed into the two channels of the mixer. The output of the mixer is going into the magneto, and that's going straight into our main output. So we've got spring reverb and delay on both of these. Kind of get my point. I could let that play out or whatever, but my point is, here I have something that's not part of the Eurorack case, taking advantage of elements that are in it. And yes, in this situation, it is the supporting architecture, but if I wanted to run an LFO out of there into the Hades, that'd be no problem. If I wanted to run an envelope out of there into the Hades, that would be no problem. So sort of like our first subversion, but also like what would have happened if you grew from one of the middle setup. Can I be super honest with you guys? After I said it in that way, it makes me feel like I don't need to conclude with this at all. But I also feel like this is sort of like once you've grown into Eurorack past those middle stages, this is what a setup with a semi-modular is going to look like. You're not going to be willing to give up your most precious resource, rack space, to something that doesn't really require it. So for the intermediate stages, I think it's very nice that these can pack in. But if you're at a point where it's like, man, I just need more space, put the semi-modular guys back in their little sleds for sure, but incorporate them exactly as you would if they were in the case. So there you go. That's kind of the last thing I wanted to say. There we go. And you know what? I've kind of tricked myself into thinking this last setup isn't really worth it. Yeah, it's cool. I want to show you like my cool setup, but I'm not here to really like show off. I'm here to like say, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you think about this? And this last one is, hey, did you think about incorporating the semi-modulars exactly as you were when they were in the rack, but out of the rack because you grew too much? But I feel like the combined information from the other ones, you guys would have put that together yourselves. So there you go. Eurorack is flexible. Above all, it's fun and it's expensive, but it's flexible. And even just in this setup, there isn't one way to use every one of these modules, even though it feels really, really straightforward. And that's part of what I like about it. I could pull this cable out and decide to put it somewhere else, and suddenly I've got a very, very different patch. And there's a lot of ways of making music where that flexibility isn't available, let alone that hands-on. And that's part of why I find myself really into Eurorack lately. And part of what is so exciting about Eurorack these days, there are lots of options like this. There are lots of tiny, flexible, relatively affordable, self-contained synthesizers that let you grow into a setup like this. And let a setup like this actually happen bit by bit. If I just said, I'm not sure what I want in Eurorack, I'm just going to buy a filter. Well, you can't do anything with a filter on its own. You need the rest of the supporting architecture to do it. So if you have a semi-modular guy, a packed-in semi-modular guy, and you just want to try a different filter, you want to add another oscillator, it's so much easier to start Eurorack like that because you can actually tiptoe in. You don't need to buy a complete voice architecture immediately before deciding if it's worth it. The only thing you really kind of have to commit to is a case. There you go. I believe I've made my point about how flexible these semi-modular guys can be, how much I like them. I appreciate you watching. I think editing this is going to be weird. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thanks for watching. My name's Jorb. I love gear. That includes everything you see right now and all the stuff that's loose on the table as well. So thanks for watching. Cheers and so long.